thank you for joining us this morning. We do have a fair number of items to go through as an update, as Pastor mentioned in the announcements, on where we are on the Forward program, on the single site ministry plan. So we'll jump right into that following an opening by Pastor Hilmer.
We'll bow our heads in prayer. Lord God, this is the day that you have made. We once again give you thanks for this gift, to privilege to come to worship you, to sing your praise, to hear of your grace, to rejoice in your love for us. We also give you thanks for the blessings that you have led us forward to this day here, and the opportunity to go forward in faith, to build a house for you, a place to proclaim your name where more and more people will hear of your grace. Bless our time together and grant us wisdom as we go forward. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. And again, thank you for joining us this morning. We will provide an update as we left last in October with our open forum. We'll provide an update from the building committee and where we are in that whole design process. And we do have a cost review to be able to share. The contractors have gone out and done a number of things with getting actual bids from subcontractors, so we have some really, really good information to share with that. And then also the financial planning outline on how do we think that we will get there as a congregation in terms of our funding for the single site ministry plan. And then just another quick update on where we are with the forward appeal, as Pastor had mentioned. So, and we'll wrap up, spend probably a good half of our time we'll have open for any additional questions or discussion that anybody might have as we're moving forward. So as a kind of as a reset, obviously as we met a little more than a year and a half ago now, and as a part of our long-term strategic ministry plan, and having our single site ministry plan complete, and with that target to be complete by the 2026 timeframe. And we are on track for that, as well as with a number of the other initiatives. And as Pastor mentioned earlier as well, the blessings that we have seen as a congregation have just been absolutely remarkable. Our financial blessings continue as a congregation, not only for some of our capital work, but certainly our unified budget offerings. We've seen increases year over year from our unified budget offerings. Our school growth continues. In fact, on Tuesday night, we're going to see a proposal at the voters' meeting to expand our 3K and 4K programs both to add additional groups of 3K and 4K. So we continue to see a tremendous amount of growth at our school, a lot of that starting in those early classroom times. And worshiping together again. A pastor shared a little anecdote this morning. He was down to one last cup of wine and went through all three trays. So worshiping together and being able to be together. So our attendance has been just remarkable. We're actually at, or maybe even after today, exceeding what our pre-COVID in-person worship attendance was. So what a blessing that is to be together. And I think this number is probably outdated as of a couple of weeks ago. We've had over 170 new members join us here at St. Matthew's since January of 2020. You know, during the whole pandemic challenges that we've had. So what a phenomenal blessing that we've had as a congregation. And it's humbling and exciting to see God's blessings here for us at St. Matthew's. So as we look today, this is kind of our high-level timeline. As we're working our way through the timeline today, we're going to be sharing some of the details that we've put together, a lot more detail than we had even just a month ago. So the building committee, the steering committee, the subcommittees have been working very diligently, and Mark and Kyle and John are going to share some of the results of all of that work. And don't let those guys fool you. They're not the only ones doing the work on that. There's a tremendous amount of work being done by a number of people on the committees and outside of those direct committees. So that is where we are today. Just again, our focus for that single site ministry is our sanctuary, that area that we also had called Phase 1B of the school. That included the commons, the music, the kitchen area, and then additional classrooms as we've seen that grow remarkably over only the past couple of years that we have been in the new school site. So that's kind of what we're looking forward to doing a little bit this morning. And at this point, I'm going to pass it on to Mark Klug, and he'll walk through the steering committee update.
Thanks, Bob. Good morning, everyone. Great to see everyone here. What a great crowd. Bob's absolutely right. Don't let any of us fool you. We've had a lot of talent, and I'm humbled and honored to be a part of it. It's been great to see so much of the involvement. Now I messed up the, there we go. So what's really incredibly just an absolute blessing to be a part of is just to see the work of growth, our architects and their listening and absorption ability, also with Catalyst and their working ability with growth, the type of synergy and the mindset that they have, and the working together in terms of our plan and our needs, and to develop and to build exactly what we really want to build, and to keep it under a budget and cost conscious to what we can really put into a budget and afford to build. Again, we had a lot of needs. Internal ministry group has needs for meeting space, and so we needed to look at that. And we went out and we looked at a lot of different churches to look at all of their sanctuary areas, including the accompanying areas to the sanctuary. The site visits continued to be reflected on, even visited, and so we wanted to take that information from a large variety of information pieces and sources and other site visits and actually put that into play. And so we continued to refine and look at those areas, and also feedback from school, from ministry groups, from the pastors, from worship areas, and really put that into play. And so we talked about that at the last open forum on October 17th, but we continued to do some refinement based on a lot of information coming in. The preliminary budget that we talked about when we first put this into play back in October 17th actually came to more around 11.8 million versus the 10.5 million that we've discussed and put into our forward campaign. So we looked at all of that because of all the refinements, and we kept on adding, and we looked at the areas of need, and we really wanted to look at what adjustment to it, but still keep the same type of needs that we had for the sanctuary and for the school, but make some adjustments to really get into a budget alignment. So the key plan adjustments looked at parking to still have adequate parking, but maybe to reduce some of that at this point, but still to actually provide senior and ADA access. That was really important for us, including close access to the church under carport, and actually expanding those spaces so that we actually really look at our seniors and for ADA access to be acceptable and expanded from what we have today. And then we originally thought of, actually at one point we said 4 classrooms, and then we went to 8 classrooms. Obviously there's a cost to all of that. And then those 8 classrooms actually had 2 expansion points. And so we looked at the opportunity of looking at 6 additional classrooms and putting that into play, and then actually having that developed and then saving on common space to help us with budget alignment. And then we also had minor adjustments to chapel and band and music room. Actually, we looked at the music room in expansion, took away a practice room, but then all looked at those changes to help us with where we could go from 11.8 back to approximately 10.5 million, and still accomplish the same type of ministry that we wanted. And so, again, what an incredible view of this sanctuary from Highway P, including the carport and the bell tower. In fact, one of the options by Catalyst is the bell tower is approximately $175,000, and so we could save on that. But the bell tower is also a pinnacle and a beacon to the community of who we are and what we mean in terms of a Christian church. And so an important site element for us. And then the carport itself is an important aspect of inclement weather. And so when it's snowing and raining, that we actually have a drop-off station for individuals to have a dry area to go to inside our sanctuary. And actually we have some additions to the steeple that are really quite prominent too, that we want to actually continue the prominence of the steeple, and so we'll probably have additional renderings on that to show you soon. The senior parking, so we added 7 additional stalls with an island, and including senior parking stalls just to the south of that, 18 stalls, and then to the right of that on the side there, where it's actually easy access to the carport and to the entry. There are some concerns of putting parking on the side where Highway P is. We talked quite a bit about that and what did we need to decide on in terms of what is best for entry by our seniors and individuals that needed closer entry to the sanctuary. The actual parking lot to the side of it doesn't offer an additional carport unless we looked at that expense. It also offers a different entry point to the sanctuary where it is not probably aesthetically pleasing from Brown Street, and also what kind of door and entryways into a sanctuary do you want to create for especially cold weather. And so all of that was taken into consideration, and then including what we would need for access into the parking lot and exit out of the parking lot. And if you're talking about just to the right up to the sanctuary, most likely you would have to consider a road to the back end, which would also add considerable expense. So there is a clogging of traffic flow from a discussion point, and there is also an issue of entry in and entry out in terms of what we could provide for additional carport entry and parking and island, and actually adding to our usher experience where we could actually have potentially even a valet experience, or an experience where each senior and individual could actually have entry where there is no elevation issue. There's not today we have always an entrance issue of going up the stairs to the sanctuary, and that would not be an issue with this new design. So again, significant additional parking spots for seniors and for ADA that would be added. So then also the 6 classrooms would be on the far west end, which is where our growth is, and that would be an area where more of our growth for the early generation to actually be enhanced. And we talked to Tom quite a bit about this, and so for an expansion of 6 classrooms now, we're at a point where we could shell out 4 of those classrooms and complete 2 or potentially 3, and then what we have is an ability to grow, build the infrastructure, because it takes infrastructure to actually accommodate these kids appropriately. And so Tom and I talked about that in our meetings, and so it's also important to look at the right type of infrastructure growth with your building and planning, and we could actually complete the rest of the classrooms in due time to also coincide with our infrastructure needs. And that would be the expansion of our classroom. Again, what that does is that creates 6 classrooms with common entries rather than 2 with common entries, so that actually saved us approximately 4,000 square feet with some additions or with some extractions from the music room area, although the music room actually grew from about 1,200 square feet to 1,400 square feet. So we expanded the music room because we wanted to actually have a larger music room for the expansion of our kids, and then just took away one of the practice rooms. We did not take away anything from the gathering space. We did shorten the chapel from about 100 and some seats to 88 seats, and so that chapel still is a significant smaller chapel down in this lower area, and so that saved us also some square footage and cost. Again, getting the 11.8 down to 10.5 approximately. Again, the music and band room expanded, and then also we still have the shared extended learning and Sunday school spaces and the ACTS room that's a part of this too, so that continued to be a part of this. So what's the cost of all this? We can talk more about the building and planning and question and answer, but the cost is also important, and John's going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yep, thank you, Mark. So we've communicated a range of cost as we've gone through the development project, and on the high end, we have sort of stuck with the $10.5 million, And that's still where we're projected to come in at right now. 9.5 million, I'm sorry, 9.2 million of it is the sanctuary and school, and you can see the various support areas, and then 3.5 million for the additional classrooms. I'm sorry, 1.3 million. Probably should look at the slide, hey. But take note, I'm not sure how many people caught it. So of the 6 additional classrooms, 2 of them we're thinking of shelling those out. So essentially it'd be an empty room. It would have the floors, it would have the walls and the ceilings, but it wouldn't be set up, 100% like per the other classrooms. And maybe we could talk about that a little bit more in a Q&A, but that has to go with the strategy of being able to staff additional classrooms. Like when this facility opens up, we won't have the ability to hire 6 additional teachers right away. So we'll need to grow into the additional school space over time. And there's sort of a high-level plan for how that school growth could look. So with $10.5 million, so how would we pay for it? So there are 5 main points of potential or of revenue sources that'll pay for it to help us obtain the $10.5 million. So looking at each of them, so we currently have a fund that's appropriately called the New Church Fund, and there's about $425,000 in that fund that's allocated to this build. And you'll notice as I go through each section, this will start adding up to the $10.5 million. The second source of revenue is from the lease funds from the LCCA school that is currently renting our old school facility. And actually, technically, this account has more than $425,000 into it because the proceeds, as we receive the rent income from the school, they are being directed into that new school account. But then this also new school account is also where we're paying our architects from, where we're paying our other partners from. So that's a sort of a dynamic account, but functionally, 4.25 and then at an almost $750,000 in that one. And then for the future sale of this property, right now we have a range estimate of $1.5 million to $2 million. So that gets us up to the 2.7. And then the forward campaign. We currently have a target of raising $3.4 million through the capital campaign, and early indications show that is very obtainable. So that's a number that will likely possibly even exceed. So then the remainder, combination of bond and conventional loan. If you remember with the school portion, so with the 6 additional classrooms, the band, and some of those other school support rooms, those will be eligible for similar type bonding scenario that we did when we built the first phase. So it will be a combination of bonding and conventionals. And then this is sort of one potential scenario to just sort of understand how the various variables impact loan size. So for example, if the sale of this property generates $1.5 million, then our loan would need to be, sort of that much larger. And then sort of conversely, if the sale of this property generates $2.5 million, then we would need to borrow less money. So that's just two potential scenarios. This variable as well, if we generate more money during the capital campaign, then again, we wouldn't have to borrow as much. So there's a handful of scenarios out there, and that's why we have in the forward campaign brochure and information, we have ranges for each of these, just because there isn't any really specific numbers that we know of just yet, because these things are still fluid. But the ranges are accurate, and as we solidify some of these numbers, then we can get more and more exact of what our actual lending needs will need to be. All right, and now to talk about what's next. Here's Kyle.
Thank you, John. And good morning, everyone. So we're at a critical spot, really, in the program development this morning. We've assessed our needs starting last January. It's kind of hard for me to believe, but we've been at this now for about 11 months. And we went through a needs assessment phase. From the needs, we defined some requirements, like a typical project in the business world. We partnered with known partners to move those requirements into a design, a high-level design at first, without firm estimates. And now over the last couple of months, since September, we've refined those estimates and become much more detailed about it. So we have, as Bob pointed out, we've actually, through our partnership with Catalyst Construction, we've worked with subcontractors at a very detailed level, to the point where Matt of Catalyst said that every square foot that we've put in a floor plan now has an estimate around it. So when you've heard some of these numbers, we have much more confidence in that estimate for the larger building of about $11.8 million, which we've now, through refinements and so on, moved it back to the estimate of 10.5 as we've communicated with you. So we're at the cusp, or the culmination, of heading into the voters' meeting with a recommendation. And we find ourselves really looking back at the program, the tenets of the program again, around our faith and our future and our legacy, which you have heard from us. We've been trying to be consistent with our messaging throughout. We have the forward appeal underway. This would be the 5th week of the appeal that will culminate on December 5th, next Sunday, with our Commitment Sunday. And we really had a choice around how much detail we wanted to share at this session. And we decided to just transparently share everything we have, because we really want you to all prayerfully consider your commitment. So we've worked as a committee, as both Bob and Mark have alluded to, quite substantially over about the last 5 or 6 weeks to get to this spot. So we can tell you exactly what the options are, who we've spoken with, how detailed the estimates are, what the financial costs might be, what the sources of revenue are. Some of those, of course, are estimates. And so now we just ask you to really think about your commitment to the program. And it is an opportunity of a lifetime. We've talked about that throughout the year. And as I reflect on it, looking back the last 11 months, I would have to admit to you, it's really kind of come crashing in on all of us, I think, that have worked on this, that this is just a tremendous opportunity for us. So with that, all that information, I'm sure there are some questions. I know this group, and it's a bigger group today. We've got about a half an hour, and I will do my best to repeat your questions so everybody can hear them. And we have our whole raft of our steering committee here today, so if I need some help from someone, I'll make sure and refer the question to someone else. Yes? So, sure, yeah, so the question is around the sanctuary and whether there's really kind of a pitch to the floor, like a stadium concept. And the answer to that is no. It is more of a flat design. And the reasoning for that is it's really kind of a wraparound concept. So what we talked about last time, and as you've seen in some of the designs, it is not like a traditional narrow vertical design. It's more of a horizontal design. The current sanctuary only has 12 rows of pews. So you have to kind of, think about that. So it's very wide across, So much more of a horizontal design. And so with that kind of a design, you don't have nearly the challenge of craning your neck over the top of someone. You can reposition yourself, and you're only 12 rows away from the pastor. Okay? Yes, John. How old is the school? The new school, we're in our 4th year at the new campus. How old is the school? The school was started in, no, that was the church. The school started in 1961, John, so it would be 59 years. 4 years. The new school building is 4 years old. That's correct. I believe it's 233 students at St. Matthew's. If we complete all 6 classrooms we've talked about over time, what we've put out today is that we would completely finish 4 of the 6. Each classroom has a capacity of 25 students. So that would add a capacity of additional 100 students. With the additional 2 classrooms, that would add 50 more. So that our new capacity would be in the range of 380 to 390 students. We are in the 1,100 to 1,200 total membership range today at our church. We do, yeah, as part of our 6-year ministry plan discussions that Bob's alluded to several times. We have a projection of 1,800 members at the end of the 6-year period. The capacity for membership, the capacity of the church for worship is a shade over 550 per service. And there's another 75-ish seats in the choir area. It's in the new church. Okay. Okay, thanks, John. My mom used to joke that I liked the show The Price is Right when I was a kid, because I always liked numbers. So I like John. He's asking me lots of numbers questions. Yes, June. Oh, okay, so the question June is asking is there a reason we didn't show a slide that shows the breakdown of commitments at each level? I would say it's probably an oversight. I would say to you, June, that we did provide that information in every folder. It is in the folder. It is a good point that it's another reminder, for us that we need to prayerfully consider what we're giving. We all have different levels of blessings, of course, so we need to evaluate our own situations. But I think that would be the reason. It's probably because we put it in each individual folder. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Ralph. Okay, Ralph's voice carries pretty well. It's a deep voice, so you probably heard him, but just to reiterate it, the question is the $10.5 million figure sort of a locked-in budget figure, or would we reconsider the total cost of the project if our commitments were, I'll call them an outrageous amount, which is great. You know, we need to give hilariously, right? And I would just say, Ralph, that we've been very cognizant of our messaging. So we've wanted to honor what we've said. We haven't really, I wouldn't say firmly ever talked about it as a firm budget. We've just been trying to be locked down on our messaging. And we talked about back in September when the first floor plan came out that we weren't sure what this facility or this expansion was going to cost, but we thought it would be in the $10 to $11 million range. And now we learned it was $11.8 million. Thus we went through the refinements and so forth. So I would say we would be open. And we do have another checkpoint, by the way, as a congregation. We have the voters meeting on Tuesday, and we'll be sharing, based on feedback today, we're not done listening, by the way. We keep refining, and we've been emailing throughout the weekend, this weekend, with refinements. So we'll ask the congregation on Tuesday, for the ability to move forward, but we have another checkpoint coming up after the first of the year, and by then we will know the commitments, because of course we're having the commitment Sunday next Sunday, and we'll also be listening for what is the mood of the congregation. Is it an aggressive kind of mood from you, or where are we? So we aren't done listening. Does that help? Dan, you had your hand up.
The current indebtedness on the school, I believe, is around $6.6 million. Can you tell us what is the interest rate that we're paying for that particular loan, and what is kind of the going rate right now for future loan? Or is it different because we're talking bonds and so forth?
Sure.
Can you explain that?
Sure. Dan was asking about our current loan, and you're right, the balance is right around 6.6 to 6.7 million, I think is right. The rate that we landed on was 3.25% on the bank bond financing, and that was on a 30-year amortization, but it was locked in for 7 years. Okay, the current rate in the marketplace today is very similar. There's some upward pressure, as many of you have been reading about inflation and so forth. So the bank bond rate is very similar at that 3.25%. The commercial lending rate is about a percentage higher. It's around 4.25%, and again, I think there'll be some upward pressure as we go here. Granted that our federal government continues to stimulate our economy. Is that helpful, Dan?
Yes. Can we also prepay those loans?
We do have on the bank bond, we can, it isn't really viewed as a refinance. We can wrap the prior bank bond into a new larger bank bond to cover both the original phase and our new expansion, if we wish. We can do it that way. So sort of wrap it all together. And then for the church aspect of our financing needs, we would go with a commercial loan for that portion. So all the school-related and educational-related costs would be wrapped into either one or two bank bonds. We have that choice. And the church-related would be a loan through our commercial bank, First Bank, which would be a separate loan. Okay? So there'd be at least two different lending vehicles, if you will. Is that helpful? Okay. Kathy, I saw your hand.
Is there a committee on interior decorating, and the cost for that, is that all included?
Kathy's question, is there an interior decorating committee? We're calling it an interior design committee, and the answer is yes. There's a relatively large group of people who just started meeting. Shar has graciously agreed to lead that group. Pastor Hilmer is very interested in this topic as well. So there's a group that's just started, Kathy, and the estimates that we receive from Matt and from Catalyst Construction do include all those systems and all of those finishes as part of that estimate. One thing I just wanted to, it's good that you asked some detail about that. One thing I want you all to understand is when we went through the first phase, we went through a similar process. We had a couple of different options. We called them 1A and 1B. Some of you are familiar with that, and we stuck with 1A at the time. The reason for sticking with 1A, by the way, was that we had a really difficult time obtaining financing. And so we were limited, we were capped in terms of the loan amount that we could get. It wasn't that we necessarily didn't want to do the full expansion at that time. But I just wanted to, share that, this interior design group is just getting started. We're going to have several decisions to make coming up. And if you want to become involved, you can certainly talk with Shar. Okay? John, back to you.
Yeah. Isn't $6 million a potential $5 to $10 million? Isn't that a pretty big debt for a church?
John's comment would be having an outstanding balance of over $6 million and also looking at an additional loan of over $5 million. Isn't that a relatively large debt for a church to carry? I would say that just depends on your perspective, John. At our congregation, I would say, I'll give you two answers. One would be the secular answer, and one would be the ministry answer. The secular answer would be, that's a big amount of money. I don't have $11 million sitting around, and most of us don't. Okay, so from a secular point of view, I would say it's a big dollar figure. When you're talking about our ministry at St. Matthew's, it's sort of like the analogy I would use is for us to stop and really consider slowing things down. There may be a big stream of people that would run right up the center, run me right over if I started to propose that, based on what I'm hearing as a vibe from our congregation over the last 11 months. And, the message of saving people with the gospel, we take that seriously here. So those are the two. Yeah, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Yeah. I was heading down that path earlier. Mark brought up the contingency factor that's being included in the budget number. So there's a contingency dollar amount of $700,000 that Catalyst Construction has included in the overall estimate of, now that we've refined it down to $10.5 million. That represents about 6.7% of the overall fund. Similarly, during phase one, there was a contingency reserve of just over $400,000. In phase one, we didn't use that full contingency. Part of the reason was because we had so many volunteers helping us during phase one. In fact, we had so many volunteers that Matt from Catalyst Construction gave us a credit of $150,000 against our costs. So not only did we spend the contingency, but we obtained a credit last time because of our membership's involvement. But that's a good point, Mark. That's a very conservative plugged number of $700,000. Matt and Eric, who we've been working with, when we push them, they don't know of a hole or a gap. But we also live in a supply chain era right now that is challenging. So the estimates they're using presume some costs for building that are changing. So we have to have some kind of level of contingency for that reason. Yeah, Mark's point is a good one. Just an additional comment would be, last time it was brand new. We just had raw land. We were putting in, a sewer system, all kinds of different things with the local community out there. This time it's much more of a known property, and so we don't have nearly the level of risk from a risk management perspective around additional costs. Pat, I know you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a concern about the growth. I'm wondering, and I expect there's not a specific answer to this. I wondered what percent of our student population are non-members. And the reason I ask that is because I was been concerned whether our growth both at the school and membership is related to the fact that our school was open when the public schools were pretty much closed down. Is that growth likely to continue, or was it a spurt?
Okay, so Pat, if you couldn't hear her, Pat's comment is around our school enrollment and the growth associated, and whether or not it's a sustainable type of growth versus just a spurt, she called it. That's a fun word to say. Is it a short-term growth orientation or a longer-term growth orientation? And one of her questions had to do with how many of the current school enrollment would be non-members. So Tom, I don't know if you have that handy. I don't know that number.
Just looking at the numbers right now, of our membership that we have, 169 of the students are St. Matthews members, or are affiliated with St. Matthews. Non-members, no church home, we only have 6 out of the entire enrollment. There are 16 different churches represented.
So approximately 80 are not St. Matthew's people.
Yeah, there are 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Wells churches are represented.
So I'll give you some rough math. Just keep me honest though, Tom. If we're at 233 for total school enrollment, and we're about at 170, 233, and 170 are St. Matthew's kids, the difference would be 63. 6 of those are not affiliated with any, so that leaves 57. And 10 congregations are sending their children to our school to comprise that 57 at varying levels. Okay. Those members are, sure. So Chris's point would be that those families that are sending those 57 students are not supporting our church in our operating budget. Yeah. Andy, I'll go with you next.
If I'm understanding things correctly, there are going to be six additional classrooms, 4 fully, framed, ready to go. And then, am I correct, 3 flex Sunday school type classrooms as well? Are those 3 going to be built to the same specs or similar specs to our regular classrooms? Should the Lord continue to bless us and we get to a point where we maybe need to use those additional 3, bringing up the total of 9 additional classrooms, if again, the Lord would bless our numbers to that degree?
Okay. Andy has a really great voice. So he was asking about whether or not the 3 additional extended learning Sunday school classrooms were built out to the regular classroom specs, and could those be leveraged for future growth? And the answer is no. Okay. The square footage of each of those rooms is about 250 square feet. So those rooms were sort of viewed as, I'd call them project rooms, if you want to think of it that way, where a teacher or a helper, like Robin, my wife, helps with extended learning. If she had a group of 5 children from a, third grade. She could take them in one of those rooms for some period of time and work on a project with them. They're perfect for Sunday school, I think, because of their proximity. They're not necessarily perfect for the school because of their proximity. So they're sort of in a tough spot for the school. But I think those rooms will become flexible for other programs like music as well. There are a couple of music rooms that were shown. When those rooms are not being used for singing or for music, I think that would be another flexible spot. The other thing, Andy, that I think we've discussed would be if the Lord continues to bless us, and of course this is an aggressive comment, we already know that we can put 4 classrooms on the north side of the property. Right now we've got the 6 on the very west edge, but we had proposed 4 kind of down the middle to extend north toward the playground area. That would be another spot where we could naturally grow. We'd finish the 2 that we aren't finishing now or soon as our first step. My guess is we would look at those 4 as the next step. Yes. Yes. It's wide. Yeah. So what we're, see if this works. Is this like a little pointer thing? Yeah, there we go. So this is what we're talking about. I don't have that dimension, the width dimension memorized. I don't know, Mark, if you've got something you can blow up. Okay, so for those of you in the back, we're sort of kibitzing up here a little bit. The square footage of the purplish area of the sanctuary is 6,255 square feet. We don't know the width, but it is very, very large. And Bob's suggestion is if you've ever been at St. Paul's in Lake Mills, our sanctuary design is somewhat similar. And the gathering space, this lighter blue area, at St. Paul's in Lake Mills, their gathering space is about 4,000 square feet, and this is proposed to be about 3,800, including the little rooms like the coffee room and things like that. Yes? They do. Okay. Okay, Tim. Yeah, that's a great point, Tim. Tim's point would be back to the school growth and whether it's sustainable and sort of what's the community mood around education in general. LCCA essentially announced that they were going to start their school last spring, and they now have 400, I think it's 406, 403, or 406 students enrolled, and they're already back to us talking about expansion. So I think the mood still, it could be short-lived, but I think the mood is very aggressive. Okay, Mark's point about the uproar of the local parents in the community, it isn't so much about the reaction to COVID, it's more about the changes to the curricula that the public school has made in the Oconomowoc School District. Okay.
Just one other thing too, in relation to the contingency, the timing that we're doing this, we shouldn't have any winter charges. And I think we had about 150,000 winter charges on the school previously.
Right, right. Yeah, I just keep bringing it up, but we're going to have church next year for Christmas, and I mean, I hope you all come, because Robin and I are going to be there. Yeah, we're going to be there somehow. Folding chairs work. Scott?
One of the items brought up the last one was storage. You gave a very honest answer, I thought, but there was perhaps need to be reconsidered. I don't see anything new on here for storage.
Yeah, you're right, Scott. I'll be candid again. I think it's not like I took any heat from anybody from the committee for saying it, because I think it is still a real concern. Okay, we have a lot of programs at St. Matthew's. We are a very active congregation, and when you have programs like a live nativity and various community events, you're going to end up with stuff, right? I don't know that there's a lot we can do to the design in the near term. I think we can expand the cold storage. I brought that up, I think, on the 17th. I think that's still viable. We have some issues because of what we built around the cold storage that we'd have to contend with. That would cost us more money. But I don't think within the design itself we have much more room for storage right now. So I think that could be an issue for us, especially if we grow to 1,800 members and our school becomes 400 students, right? Because our program is going to grow. Okay. June. Okay. Sure. Yeah, June, I hope you don't die in the next 3 years. just so I can say that out loud. No, it's a very thoughtful comment. Of course, a bank will consider like a memorial, like a bequest. So working with our pastors to give that confidential information is very valuable. Okay, you can still make your commitment, for the 3-year period. And I do know that there are some members that we've spoken with during this round or this phase that have said the same thing. That their commitment may not be the same because they have a plan to give us something upon their death. Of course. Of course. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Betty. Okay.
I do not have a question, I have a comment. Looking at this amazing gathering of brothers and sisters in Christ, we need to remember not every generation gets the opportunity to do this.
Thank you, Betty.
It's a wonderful opportunity.
I agree with you. Yes. Sure. Yeah. What is your first name? Carl. Carl had a comment. Now would be a great time to talk to your financial advisor. They tend to deal with these kind of topics as their day job, and so they can talk about different options you have if you have IRAs and different financial vehicles that you're using. The federal tax laws are changing, and so it's a really good time to talk to them. And Robin and I did the same thing. We've had the same representative, in our case from Baird, since we moved here in the year 2000. So he knows us well, and he had some great ideas. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Carl's comment is his kids aren't going to suffer a bit. We do need to, we have people starting to come for the next service at 10:30. And so, oh, I'm sorry, Carrie.
I just wanted to ask with the changes with the classrooms, with us doing a lesser amount and not finishing them all the way right away. Right now, we're turning away families. Do we have a timeline of when, how long it will be after those are done that we will start welcoming and recruiting new students?
Okay, so Carrie's comment had to do with we've reduced the number of classrooms, at least what we've talked about this morning, down to the 4. Do we have a timeline for the families that are currently on a wait list, and when will we be able to start to enroll them? And I would say, Carrie, just the practical answer would be having the 4 classrooms starting up with the 2023 school year. We would be able to receive at least a big portion of those families and their students. We'll be targeting the younger ages, so there may be some exceptions. If there's like a kindergarten, 3rd, and 7th grader as the 3 children, we may not be able to accommodate all of those combinations, but it would be with that fall of 2023 school year. Yes, Al?
When you give an offering now, is the school offering going to be separate from the church offering? Or can you just put that all in one envelope and it goes just to one account?
We do have a dedicated, or a designated, I should say, not dedicated, a designated account for the Forward program, Al. And so it would be best, if you want to give to that particular program, to designate it that way. And then if you're giving to the regular operating fund, to use that envelope. So to answer your question, there are 2 different accounts. One for the Forward campaign and one for regular.
My question was, is the school going to still be a separate account and the new church going to be a separate account, or you just put it all in one offering?
Oh, the Forward yeah, Pat? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. There's really just one Forward fund or account.
So you just make a check out for one, just for the...
Correct. Right. It's all being lumped, whether it's the school or the church, it's all being lumped into one account. Pastor is gone. Pastor's here. Did you have anything else you wanted to share? Okay. Thank you very much. Please prayerfully consider your commitment. We'll have that as part of our service next week on December 5th. Thanks so much for coming and all of the great questions, and we will continue to listen. So if you have other feedback and you want to share that one-on-one, please pull one of us aside. Thank you so much.